Hey everybody, this is Perch. This mail is good. I like this question because I think it is correct. So here we go. You're gonna have to think about this for a second because your gut reaction may not be the reaction you settle with. I suspect most of the people listening to this video are all going to get to the same place at the end. So that phrasing, right? Yeah. Well, based on what we're about to talk about, yeah, phrasing. Okay, so the mail is: does sexuality really matter in superhero universes? All right, so here we go. It says, howdy, Perch. I've been thinking about comics and have come to the realization that sexuality really doesn't matter in the context of the big two universes, since somebody like Lex Luthor or Moon Girl could create a ray that changes people's sexuality. I, okay. Anyway, I agree, but for a different reason, not for the Moon Girl sex change ray reason. But anyway, let's keep going. It says, picture Moon Girl gets bored and shoots her gay ray at random people. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm just picturing her riding around on Devil Dinosaur now, just randomly shooting people with the gay ray. Um, anyway, God, what's going on with comics? Anyway, her ray hits Carol Danvers, and she breaks up with Rhodey again, and Carol instantly becomes the lesbian the internet thinks she is. It could be a summer event. Um, anyway, so if a character's sexuality can be changed in an instant, does LGBTQ issues really matter in the context of DC and Marvel universes? Okay, so I I agree with this premise, but for a different reason. Not the gay ray reason, although that was the whole. I did the video talking about, trans in superhero universes really makes very little sense when we've seen, I mean, even as far back as the '80s, that supervillains, and not even really good supervillains, like random crappy supervillains, can make machines that can just change you into a woman with giant tits, by the way, as well. And this is going on in comics. Do you notice that whenever like the men get turned into women for some reason, they're all like super fit. Now, granted, a lot of the men are fit, but they also just have like giant tits floating around on there. It's they're not like athlete sport women like Frank Cho draws very busty women, and people bitch about that, but they're also pretty fit. Like they look kind of muscular. I mean, they're but in the '90s, these male characters would like go into a ray. I mean, I remember the Punisher goes in his ray, and then suddenly he turns into like this 98-pound supermodel with like triple H breasts. It's like, what exactly is this machine doing? Anyway, the point is that dealing with trans issues and some of the sexuality issues in comics is kind of absurd because there's science, there's cosmic deities that could just change you. The end. Save all kinds of money on surgery and everything. You can be whatever you want. In fact, you can be whatever you want every single day. Hell, we briefly got the nod, although they haven't explored it more, that in the X-Men Resurrection protocols on Krakoa, they were able to take Destiny and bring her back younger. And they didn't quite say in the comics, like, I brought you back, young and fit, as opposed to old and wrinkly. So now we can have some super banging sex. That's basically what they said, because if you think about it, if you can resurrect people an unlimited amount, why do you care about whether she's brought back young or old? You bring her back, if you bring her back old and she dies 5 years later, just resurrect her again. So the idea of like, I brought you back to the prime of your life when your boobs are super awesome and banging. Anyway, we all know what's going on there. But, okay. But does sexuality really matter in superhero comics? I'll give you a different reason. By and large, if you're thinking about comics from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, the sex life of the comic superheroes, the comic characters, was pretty much zero. Every now and then, like they kind of infer like, hey, Peter Parker's banging Mary Jane again, and they would like hint at stuff, or but it was far and few between. By and large, most superheroes out running around doing stuff are, for all intents and purposes, asexual, meaning they're not doing anything. They do little storylines or kind of romance storylines. Diamondback really is horny for Cap, but by and large, like the Cap didn't spend a lot of time being going like, Boy, you know what I've been thinking about lately? Banging girls. I sure like girls. That's who I really am. A guy who bangs girls. I love it. It's like American Pie, cherry pie. No, wait, it's just like it's American Pie, pie. And so now I've got images of the Rock in my head, but they don't like none of the characters really talked about any of this, and by and large, the stories didn't need it. I like nobody. I haven't seen many reviews, including today, when there's a much deeper obsession with gender identity and sexuality and everything else. Um, how many times have we heard somebody say, it was missing in those old Stan Lee, Jack Kirby books? It's more scenes of the characters talking about how much they like to bone people of the opposite sex. Now, I guess in fairness, if you look at the plot to X-Men #1, all the characters are like, holy shit, there's a girl. There's a girl who's come to the campus. Quick, everybody's super horny. Everybody go for the girl. That was kind of a big premise of X-Men #1. In addition to Magneto and the missiles and everything else, we did get several pages of all the men X-Men being like horny for Jean. But anyway, but by and large, a lot of these comics during these eras, they didn't talk about the characters being heterosexual. So that's kind of the argument that gets used right now. It's like, well, after decades of cis hetero comics, it's about time we finally had some LGBTQ comics. It's like, yeah, but yeah, and this is gonna be kind of weird. But go back and read a lot of those Fantastic Four, Superman, Batman comics, and I want you to just pretend as you're reading them that one or more of the characters, the main characters, are gay. Okay, so go back. I divide you this. It's actually kind of funny. Go back and read Superman from the Silver Age, and pretend he's gay. Just pretend like he's been, he's gay all this time. What you're going to discover is it doesn't contradict the comics. Very rarely. Lois Lane is still chasing after him, and Superman's largely, being like, "No, icky girl." That's kind of an unfair one, but honestly, you look at a ton of these comics, Green Lantern, Batman, the Avengers, and just pretend that the characters are, the opposite of straight, whatever it happens to be, or whatever gender identity it is. 99% of the comics read exactly the same. Every now and then, you get like a Namor really wanting to fuck Sue. Or, somebody being like, hey, here's She-Hulk. She looks good in that tan. Nobody cares. Like the comics are not written with any of this in mind. And it's actually a big difference. I've been reading a lot more comic runs lately where, I read a comic that passes, 3 decades. So a comic that spans over 20 years or 3 decades worth of time. What you're saying, 20 years, 3 decades. What I'm saying, like a comic that came out in 1979 and you read it through 95. So you're in 3 different decades. Whatever. Anyway, a comic that's had a long run. And what you notice if you've read them lately is around 2014 or so, the comics started to get much more conscious about sexuality in the comic. It didn't really exist before. Everybody just kind of, and again, when I say didn't exist, I don't mean the LGBTQ side didn't exist. I mean none of it existed. Nobody really talked about straight situations either. There was very, very little of it. By and large, the comics were just pretty much superhero action and stuff going on. Like, you'd have no idea. Certainly no idea in the villains. It just, there was nothing. And so about 2014, suddenly it becomes more of a topic where the characters have to be thinking about this, talking about this. We're going to introduce the gay friend, on and on and on. And it's become a bigger deal. But what's curious about it is that, look, the myth, I guess, is that the older comics were all, highly preferenced straight. But that's only sort of true. It's only true if you make an assumption that not saying anything at all equals straight. Because the majority of characters say nothing. And there's a lot of characters in there, by the way, and this came out when Iceman came out. Now, Iceman had the issue of, had an actual in canon storyline, long storyline, with Opal and other women he was chasing throughout the years. So that he actually is, believe it or not, Iceman's one of the few characters that had established his desire for women. Maybe he's all tricking himself and everything else. But there's other characters where they're completely like they could easily come out as gay, and you could go back and read the comics, and it would contradict nothing because the comic didn't deal with it ever at all. Comic just focused on superhero stories. It didn't think you wanted to know who the character was going to go out and bang. Now maybe, and not just maybe, most likely in the '70s, the creators are just making an assumption. Well, of course this character's straight, and they're just having their adventures, but they don't harp on it. They, in fact, not just harp on it, they don't even reference it. There's a lot of characters out there who never had any kind of committed relationship. Maybe they would show them dating somebody, but oftentimes not. And they just it's fine. Yeah, a lot of the main characters would fool around with, all right, they're dating this character, secret identity is doing this, but you get to the secondary level, and you would not know. These characters could be gay all along. Nobody has said anything. So the kind of the thing to the reason this mail is funny. I mean, Moon Girl riding around a dinosaur shooting the gay rays at people, but the maybe more thoughtful part of this is this actually hasn't really been tackled at all anywhere. And those are the comics that people tend to revere, and as opposed to looking at those as white straight comics, you really read them, they could be whatever you want them to be. I'm just saying, you're going to say no, it's not really true, but I promise you, go back and read some of these comics, and they'll go 50 issues and never mention any kind of gender preference, romance at all in any direction anywhere. They're just off doing stuff. So anyway, no, it's true. Good question, funny visual, and thanks for listening.